I will be presenting today with Chris.
I'm his bodyguard.
About some experience that we have with the first rollouts, covering ZTP in the space of SDN, of our SDN portfolio that we have, and we will do it kind of in 2 ways. Yeah, so I start first, then you take over. So this will be about service operations, and I'll pave a bit the scene, and then you go to the real lessons learned, and then we kind of catch up and give some outlook. All right, so just to set a bit the scene, you may have had a chance to listen to Peter Konings today, who gave the keynote on enabling the real-time enterprise. That is kind of all about putting the customer, the service and the product, into the focus and start to layer things then around that. So this session will continue kind of with that. We will be talking about processes and practices, so service operations for ZTP, for infrastructure and applications. This is not a session about the high-level drivers. So as I said, we have heard that. This is also not about architecture. So in case you were waiting for some magic tools here that do stuff overnight, this is not about that. And it is also not about low-level and protocols and bits and bytes. So just moving on, why are we doing this? So before we get into some of the drivers and demystify hopefully a bit the terminology here, I just want to make a statement here, because at times when we talk about automation and zero touch these days, it is often not clear exactly what do we mean by saying that. Yeah? So often conversations go the way that we say, okay, do you do automation? Yes. Do you have orchestration in place? Yes. Is it working? Yes. Is it solving all our problems? Probably not. So this is partially if you are in the middle of something that you started to, to make real and have it in operations. This is at times a difficult conversation to have. So we really need to do sometimes one step back and ask ourselves, what is it that we actually mean by that? So you hear me asking myself in the next few sentences some couple of times this question. Yeah, so drivers for ZTP. Actually, the vision of having a device or appliances configured automatically is just the last step, right? That is when we are done with everything else. But there is a lot of work that has to be done before. Actually, it is developing the product and the service, right? And what that means is just have a look at the simple task. You get a box, you get it out of the box, you plug it into a wall, yeah. But there are a million of things that you need to pay attention before, like which box, if you have a multiple choice, right? They may have different requirements. Even the fact, what kind of port does that box have? Will it fit with every access circuit together? Yeah, that gives you a couple of permutations already that you have to wrap in your product. Then automatic provisioning is maybe a good example. Yeah. What does that include? Is it the OS? Is it the appliance? Is it the configuration? Is it even some higher layers of config like policies? Where do you stop? Yeah? Or where do you do a step back and say, look, there is some stuff that is simply not applicable here. Yeah? If you have an unmanned site, well, there is nobody to take your parcel, right? So you have to take care for these exceptions, which will make ZTP even stronger for the cases where it works. So traditional provisioning, I'm not getting too much into that, because I think these are known problems, right? If these would not be known problems, we would not be doing ZTP. But there is one thing here that I want to stress. If we talk about virtual network functions, the problem is getting even bigger, right? So we just have not one box that we ship in traditional ways. We have a firewall, yeah, so we have maybe one optimization device. We have potentially different functions across the whole layer from logistics to field ops that all have to be in place at the right point in time. Very, very complex process, which makes the customer experience difficult, yeah? And in order to not have that happening, you put a lot of effort onto that in order to take care for all kind of exceptions. You go cross geographies. So this is why we do ZTP. Now, how would we do it, or how have we done it? First of all, of course, what happens is you have to make sure that your device, as I said, there may be multiple flavors of it or multiple models. Yeah, you do that. You make sure it gets pre-staged. To what level is a definition of the product or of the setup, right? In some cases, there may be none of that, yeah, but there may be cases where indeed some pre-staging makes sense or is even required. So then actually that device gets, once plugged to a network, would actually perform a function that it would register somewhere with a trusted resource in your network, yeah, and would authenticate itself and would then actually say, I'm this device here. You know, I want now to be configured with a certain service. So then some basic things would be happening, like establishing a secure connection, doing then an up-to-date to the software, and all these kind of things, which then go to the last one when you are ready to actually deploy the configuration, so the appliances, the configuration, and the policies. So my last message here on this slide for now is just bear in mind when you talk about the ZTP, this is not just one thing, right? So we have a ZTP on the device, we have a ZTP on some basic resources on the device, we have ZTP on the appliances, and we potentially have ZTP on the config. And these all need to fit together, otherwise your experience is not good, right? So I hand over to Chris, and I'll come back at the end. Thanks.
Yes, so ZTP isn't the biggest problem. There's even more, right? As if ZTP wasn't difficult enough. So thanks, Helmut. So just before I get into this slide, I've got this slide and just two more, but I've been kind of inspired, I guess, from some of the discussions that we've had earlier today. And I thought that there was one extra component I could add because I thought it would be potentially useful. So throughout the day we've talked a little bit about the implications to people. We certainly talked a lot about tools, and the big three there. The other one is process, and I think David, it was at PCCW earlier today. He made a pretty strong point that that's a good starting point, is really make sure we focus on the process, and I think he said it well. I think culture is really the fourth that I would add if I could, and I'm just going to do a quick story to illustrate, the power and the value of focusing on culture in our organizations. So a couple years ago, and I went to work, opened up my laptop, and my wallpaper was gone. And instead of my wallpaper was this, remarkably and strangely intense, wallpaper with 4 words. It said, "Change energizes us, Verizon," right? And I'm talking about wallpaper. It's true, but it pertains. So that thing showed up, at a time when we knew that our 155,000 employees were really stressed about change. We were going through a very significant transformation, right, involving our provisioning, our quote-to-cash systems, and people were really feeling it, and we knew it. And so what the leadership did from Lowell McAdam, our CEO, on down, is we prepared the leadership, to help the people through all of this change that's hitting them, right, and to leverage our culture and the credo that we have in order to turn this weakness hopefully into a strength, right? And so that day, everyone got this, again, remarkably intense wallpaper, to just kind of remind them, that, hey, our culture is important, and we have to embrace change. Now, you could say that as intense as that was, and even though some people were a little bit grumpy about messing with their wallpaper, it could have easily said, change or die, right? Because we know what's happening in the market. Certainly for the communication services providers, it's intense pressure in our main revenue streams, right? And there's predictions out there now that 5 years from now, you're going to have significantly less tier 1 providers than we have today, and may well be true, right? Some serious stuff happening out there. So it's important that we continue to leverage culture. So what's on our laptop now? It's things like our time is now, right? We really think that this is an inflection point, right? All the stuff that we're talking about, it's very real, right? And we need to do everything we can to make it go faster, right? It's our opportunity to make an impact in the market and make an impact for our customers. We have another one that says, we don't wait for the future, we build it. So again, I think for an audience like this, that's nothing new, that's nothing surprising. The reason that you're here is because you believe this, I think probably at quite a deep level. My key point here is that this culture aspect, we need to take the approach that we have in these types of gatherings and find ways to get it across the whole organization, because all of these functions, all of these changes will affect the whole organization. The other reason I bring this story up is because in some ways it's the reason that I'm here. So I'm Chris Lichko. I lead client services for Verizon's European headquartered major accounts. Effectively, that's a client relationship role. I'm measured on client satisfaction, revenue performance, and profitability. What I'm really not is an NFV or SDN or a ZTP expert. But I think that my story of how I got here also I think pertains, right? So in my base, I'm lucky that I have a number of clients that are very, very interested in what they're reading, what's in the market, and what we're telling them, right? So I noticed that we need to lean forward and engage and do everything that we can to learn about this so that we can talk intelligently and proactively with our customers and with our teams, and that's exactly what we've done. So I thank Peter and the team for having me here. So with that long introduction, the idea is that I can share a little bit more about our early experience with some of our early adopter clients, right? And some of the implications that we see, from a service provider perspective, but also from the client perspective. So this is really just reinforcing the fact that ZTP, while critical, right, and we have to get this automation working, right? From a client experience perspective, there's a whole bunch of other things that are at play. So what I'm going to talk about here and the implications for provider and customer really go beyond just pure ZTP automation. So on the top left, we see some implications for us in terms of contracting, right? So, one of the things that we have to deal with is how do you do the SLAs, right? In the old world, you had different site types, and you had different SLAs by the site types, and you put that into a schedule, right? And you wrap it all up. But now we see that same thing, but there's different SLAs depending on what the different service chains do, right? And one of the promises of all this virtualized networking is that there's an agility and a flexibility and the possibility to create even new service chains, right? So how do you contract for that? How do you break that down in a way that the customer is comfortable, but also the service provider is comfortable? I think in terms of the outcomes, right? How do you measure it, right? And again, I think some of these concepts maybe for you is well known, right? The old SLAs don't quite resonate as much when you're pitching the story of a service chain. The client ultimately wants to know, how's my application working? Is it available? Is the performance within profile, et cetera? And so how we do that and how we build it into SLAs and put into a contract is something that we're still working through. On the quoting and ordering, I think this is a reflection of, again, the idea of zero-touch provisioning and the speed that's associated with that is something that resonates in the client's mind. And when you do that, but then, as Peter Koenig's noted earlier, if your access still takes weeks and weeks and weeks, then it doesn't quite complete the dramatic effect and the value that we want to provide. So longer term, we see these APIs and our ability to interact with access providers as being quite important. But you also have expectations mismatches with things like quoting times, right? How long does it take you to get a quote out? If you can provision something in minutes, but it takes you weeks or months to quote it, right? That also doesn't work. So that's other aspects that we're focusing on. On the delivery side, I think it was Sergio at Vodafone that really, he kind of stole my thunder on this one, and maybe I'll take this opportunity to just move along, because I think if you caught his presentation earlier today, I think he really did a great job summarizing some of the complexities that we see from an operational and delivery perspective. And I especially like the point that he noted that you have legacy and new, right? And you still have to manage both for quite a long transition period. And the only thing I would add to that is, even in a per client context, right, there are really interesting, needling little complications that come up when you have a client who has an installed base on a legacy set of services, and they want to start adding things that are our new best and brightest. Moving on down to people and process, I think certainly, making sure that we have the skills, we've been talking about, the AI, the software skills. There's that whole aspect. There's the opportunity to retrain the people that we have. There's the change execution, the anxiety that the people feel. And one of the things that, some of us talk about out loud is, the implications from an organizational perspective, right? So one of the things that we've already done is we went from more regional structures where, for example, I would have the whole life cycle functions directly reporting to me for my account base. And what we did not too long ago is that we split that up and we organized globally, functionally, and then they dotted line into me for my account base, right? More of a matrix approach. The reason that we did that, of course, was because we knew that we had all of this change that had to be done globally, and it was far, far easier for us to do that with a global functional structure. So this turn of the wheel, that's how we're structured. I think there's even more follow-on organizational aspects, but again, that's where the culture comes in, right? And a willingness for people to understand that it's okay to change, and even things like structures, can change, and maybe they need to change in order for us to be successful. On the IT side, the DevOps maturity, my key point here is that, the revolution that is DevOps and IT, I think in our world, that approach, that continuous integration is something that people well beyond IT in the organization need to understand and be comfortable with, right? It's not so mysterious. It's not something that those IT wizards just do in the back closet. So everyone should have their DevOps handbook in their Kindle or next to their bedside stand and just get more comfortable with what we're doing on the IT side and make sure that the rest of the organization is plugged into it. So on the implications for the customer, Peter noted in an earlier presentation that we positioned and built for one customer some pretty cool capability, and while the architects loved it, the financial controllers didn't, because they're like, hold on, you mean people can make changes at the touch of a button that have price implications, but they have all their own compliance and financial controls to look at. Reconciliation, maybe this gets into, Robert, what you were talking about, blockchain. So you can imagine a future where everything is dynamic and automatic and you have multiple access providers, all contributing cycles. How do you account for that accurately? And even more importantly, how do you get the customer to believe that the bill that comes back is magically accurate, even though there's potentially hundreds of different service providers somehow contributing dollars and cents or euros to it? On the service definition frame, on the pay-per-use and the flexibility, I think I'm running out of time here, so I'll just speed this part up. We see that the incredible flexibility and agility that you get with network functions virtualization can be problematic and overwhelming, especially for the operational stakeholders in the client organizations. So the approach that we're starting to frame is you have specific service chain frames, and you approach them in that kind of chunk, because then people can get more comfortable about what it is that we're doing and how we're going to manage it. Co-creation, Peter in his earlier speech mentioned that we see different types of clients. Some of them just want it to work automatically. Others want to test the waters. But some of them are extremely innovative and aggressive in terms of the vision of what they want to do and the level of collaboration that they're talking with us about. So it's almost like we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and go like, how much do we want to really collaborate here with our customers. And I think, Helmut, do you want to come back up and join me? We got 1 minute. Sorry about that.
I keep it short. Thanks, Chris. So just to finish off, what's next? We're going to expand our journey here on ZTP in a couple of areas, which in itself, or if you look at them, there is nothing magic. There is not a lot of new stuff here. We have done this the one or the other way in the past already, but now we bring it together in a new way. Yeah. So I'm not going through the full list, but just to cover maybe a few of them, if you just look at CP software management and auditing, right? That is a pretty important one because we have now a very complex scenario of different software versions, CP versions, OS versions, right? You have automatic ways of repair as well, so we need to make sure that there is consistency, that there is accurate data, that we have a good methodology in place in order to manage all that, yeah, to have upgrades smoothly going on, and in order also to be able to explain to the customer how our life cycle process works. And then of course the last one in maybe intelligent path selection. When you do zero touch in a heterogeneous enterprise environment, there is not just an MPLS circuit, right? You may have sites with low quality broadband together with high quality maybe. So how do you do ZTP? How do you download your appliances, you do maintenance and all that? You need to have a very intelligent and maybe even tool in place, who is giving you the intelligence required there. So with that, I think we are good. Sorry for overrunning, and I hope it was an enjoyable talk. Thank you.